Don't stop.
There's a horrific, awful, evil event that occurred last week in Parkland, and that's what dominated the news over the weekend. President Trump is apparently now considering whether he is going to push some gun control measures. One of the reasons he's doing that is because the media have launched an all-out emotional assault on gun control. Here is what CNN, Fox News, MSNBC have been doing. They've been covering all of the students from Parkland. They're high school students, and they're speaking out about gun control. So here are some of the students announcing national demonstrations on gun control.
Today, I'd like to announce that we have an event coming up to have everybody in the nation talking about what we're talking about. And one of the things we've been hearing is that it's not the time yet to talk about gun control. And we respect that. We've lost 17 lives, and our community took 17 bullets to the heart. And it's difficult to come back from that. So here's the time that we're going to talk about gun control. March 24th, we have the March for Our Lives, which you can find at marchforourlives.com, and expect to see us a lot. The March for Our Lives is going to be in every major city, and we are organizing it so students everywhere can beg for our lives. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about the red and blue, the GOP and the Democrats. This is about adults and kids.
Now, whom are you going to beg for your life? You're going to beg Trump for your life, as though Trump could just flip a switch and suddenly these shootings would not happen anymore? There's significant disagreement about the method that should be used in order to militate against these shootings. There's significant and real disagreements on this. Right? I've suggested there ought to be wildly upped security standards at all of these schools, that there ought to be armed guards at virtually every door, that you might consider at some of these schools actually putting into place some doors that can actually close across the campus and lock like they have at hospitals. At many hospitals, they have lockdown procedures where an active shooter's in the hospital, and so you actually lock off certain parts of the hospital from other parts of the hospital so that the shooter can't just walk through the halls with impunity. And there's a lot of disagreement about this. Democrats want, of course, bans on all sorts of weapons, including the AR-15, which is the most popular rifle in the United States. But this idea that it's all about begging, that it's all about if we just cared enough, that all of this would be fine, we just agree on everything, that, of course, is not true in the slightest. This, of course, however, is what the left is suggesting. So the same student, Cameron Kasky, he says you're either with us or against us, which is pretty wild language, considering we are all with you. No one wants to see kids get shot.
You're either with us or against us. We are losing our lives while the adults are playing around. And we have received endless support from your generation, and we thank everybody for that immensely, because we really appreciate it. We don't need you. On March 24th, you are going to be seeing students in every single major city marching, and we have our lives on the line here. And at the end of the day, that is going to be what's bringing us to victory and to making some sort of right out of this tragedy.
What does victory look like? What does victory look like? That's the real big question. Okay, if victory is no more shootings, then we all agree on the definition of victory. If victory is a piece of gun control legislation that may or may not actually help, then we don't agree on what victory for the country looks like. And you can see that some of these students, obviously, they're very politically motivated. That's okay. I mean, they're allowed to have their political motivations. My problem here is the same problem that I have with the country as a whole. The country as a whole takes being on camera as some sort of imprimatur of knowledge, some sort of imprimatur of expertise. And that's really silly. So LeBron James speaks about politics. That's his right. He's allowed to do it. Some of the stuff he says, I think, is not completely wrong. But why would we treat, as a country, his version of politics with more credibility than people who have studied the issues and studied the personalities for a long time? I don't, and I don't think other people should. Why would we take a bunch of high school juniors and say that these are experts on gun policy now? They're not experts on gun policy simply because their school was targeted. These are people who have experienced significant pain, and obviously we all stand with them and mourn with them in that pain. They have it to a far greater degree, I'm sure, than anybody who's far away. But that does not mean that what they are saying on politics has any more legitimacy or that it has any more expertise to back it. And yet there's a reason the media does this, right? After the Boston Marathon attacks, did you see victims of the Boston Marathon attacks on TV every day stumping for a travel ban on Muslims? Of course you didn't. After the Orlando shootings, did you see victims of the Orlando shootings who were not left-wing going around and saying, what we need here is a restriction on the number of Muslim immigrants from countries we can't vet? Of course you didn't. Right? The media go out of their way to put people on camera who are sympathetic. This goes all the way back to the Sandy Hook shooting when Piers Morgan was attempting to do this routine, and I called him on it on air. It's highly irritating to me, and it's intellectually dishonest. But there's a reason that all these kids are being put on TV and to put pressure to the idea, by the way, that a child shall lead them when it comes to politics is silly. The idea that children are experts on policy because they have greater innocence, no, that means that they don't know enough. There's a reason that you don't let 17-year-olds define tax policy, and you shouldn't let 17-year-olds define gun policy either, depending on whether they've actually studied the issue in any significant way. But again, the media have a real interest in trotting out these kids. Here's another student talking about how Trump sickens the student.
President Trump, you control the House of Representatives, you control the Senate, and you control the executive. You haven't taken a single bill for mental health care or gun control and passed it. And that's pathetic. We've seen a government shutdown. We've seen tax reform, but nothing to save our children's lives. Are you kidding me? You think now is the time to focus on the past and not the future to prevent the death of thousands of other children? You sicken me.
Trump sickens him. Okay, well, again, Trump does not control the House. He does not control the Senate. I mean, basic civics education would be useful here. These are independent branches of government, and they have to propose and pass legislation. Democrats would filibuster, presumably, a lot of the legislation Republicans would propose. And Republicans are not going to propose legislation that their base doesn't want and that their voters don't want. This is how a republic works. Again, the reason the media are going back to the well here is because they're attempting to create an impetus for action that there is no political impetus for right now. This is aimed at the public. It's not really aimed at Trump or even the legislators. It's aimed at the general public. The suggestion being that if you disagree with these students and if you don't feel their pain in the same way that they do, and by feel their pain we mean agree with them, then that means that you are obviously an uncaring individual. Here's another student doing this routine yesterday.
We are going to be the kids that you read about in textbooks. Not because we are going to be another statistic about mass shootings in America, but because, just as David said, we are going to be the last mass shooting.
Okay, but here's the reality. That's probably not true. And none of the gun control, I mean, it's an unfortunate reality. But none of the gun control measures that are currently being proposed by the Democrats would have stopped what happened in Parkland. I've yet to hear a concrete proposal. Have you heard one? I haven't heard any concrete proposal. None. Right? This piece of crap who shot up the school had smoke grenades on him. We still don't know how he got the smoke grenades. Do you think it would have been impossible for him to go through and shoot all these students with a handgun? That's what the student at Virginia Tech used a handgun in that shooting. So blaming the AR-15 is not going to stop these mass shootings. Again, all of this is about generating emotional appeal, not about making a logical appeal. But the real goal here is to get politicians in front of these kids so these people can berate the politicians. So Marco Rubio is falling for this. He's going to go talk to the victims on camera in front of CNN.
It's not our job to tell you, Senator Rubio, how to protect us. The fact that we even have to do this is appalling. Our job is to go to school, learn, and not take a bullet. You need to figure this out. That's why you were unfortunately elected. Your job is to protect us, and our blood is on your hands.
Okay, our blood is on your hands. I mean, only if you think that the government is God and can prevent every single thing, or unless you have a piece of legislation that is backed by evidence and can suggest that there will be no more mass shootings if you pass this piece of legislation. And then we can actually have a conversation. But here's the truth. We know why this shooting took place. We know what failed here. We know what went wrong here. And I'll explain to you in a second what exactly that was. And it was not lack of gun control. Mass shootings like what happened at Parkland. But we found out that the government won't do that. Okay, we found out the FBI knew full well about the shooter in the Parkland, Florida school massacre and did nothing 2 times. 2. First, they were informed in September that a YouTube user with the shooter's real name said, quote, "I'm going to be a professional school shooter." I'm not sure what you need more than that to go and check it out. The FBI didn't even forward it to the field office. They didn't bother to share the information with local authorities. Now the Wall Street Journal reports that in January, a caller told the FBI specifically about the shooter's, quote, gun ownership, desire to kill people, erratic behavior, and disturbing social media posts, as well as the potential of him conducting a school shooting. What happened? Nothing. It was ignored. It was not even forwarded to the field office. So when we talk about the government is big enough to save us, the government's big enough to protect us, there are thousands and thousands of people in this country right now who are felons, who have guns, and the government knows about them and is doing nothing. There are thousands of people who are on the mental health rolls, and they have guns, and the government is doing nothing about them. And you're telling me that a mass gun confiscation is the way that you're going to take care of this? Or that if we have a march in the streets, that somehow this is going to accomplish the end of this? One of the ways that we could actually militate against this, there are 2 ways that I would propose, maybe 3, that would actually, I can actually name, I think, maybe 4 things that we could do that would militate against all of this. So first thing that we could do is the media should stop naming shooters and providing glory to the shooters. When we do this stuff, all we end up doing is promoting this. These are copycat crimes. A huge number of the school shooters are fans of Columbine, have downloaded information about Columbine, become obsessed with school shootings, and want to imitate it so they can get their name in the papers. the media should have an agreement all the way through, and we're going to start implementing this at Daily Wire now. I do it on my show, that we're not going to name the shooter. That is something that I think everyone should work on in the media. That's something that we can do firsthand. Second thing, we should have massive security at the schools. This idiotic notion that there is a school to prison pipeline is not backed by data. That if you have a bunch of armed guards in the schools, then kids are being arrested for silly crimes and then being sent to prison. It's just not true. The data do not support that. We have a whole article by Hank Berrien over at the Daily Wire about this. You can go and check that out. It is not the case. Other things that we can do. The mental health screenings that are already taking place. There needs to be more transparency. All of this information needs to be transmitted to local law authorities. It all needs to be put in the databases. People need to be fired or lose their jobs or lose their careers if they do not enter information that is relevant. And then something terrible happens. Because I promise you, for every school shooting that happens like this where the FBI missed it, there are 100 other instances where the FBI missed it, but there was no school shooting. If this happened once, this happened 100 times. We've now had the FBI and the CIA miss things in the San Bernardino shooting, in the Texas shooting, in this shooting, in the Charleston shooting. The government is not doing what they already have the power to do. So that's something that we certainly should be taking a look at. So those are three things right off the bat that we should be looking at. David French has a proposal over at National Review that is called a gun violence restraining order. And what he suggests, I want to find the actual verbiage. So he says that what we should do here is we should have GRVOs. He says there are various versions of these laws working their way through the states. California passed a GRVO statute in 2014, and it went into effect in 2016. Broadly speaking, they permit a spouse, parent, sibling, or person living with a troubled individual to petition a court for an order enabling law enforcement to temporarily take an individual's gun rights away. A well-crafted GVRO should contain the following elements. Quote, it should limit those who have standing to seek the order to a narrowly defined class of people, like close relatives, people living with the respondent, and should require petitioners to come forward with clear, convincing, admissible evidence the respondent is a significant danger to himself or others. It should grant the respondent an opportunity to contest the claims against him. In the event of an emergency, an ex parte order, an order granted before a respondent can contest, should be scheduled a full hearing should be scheduled quickly if there's an ex parte order. And the order should lapse after a defined period of time unless petitioners can come forward with clear and convincing evidence that it should remain in place. So this would be something that we could all agree on across the board. These seem like reasonable gun control measures to me. And they're not just gun control measures, they're societal control measures in the sense that they are restrictions we place on ourselves in order to try and tamp down the possibility of violence here. Unfortunately, we're not going to have real conversations about all of this. We're just going to shout at each other about how we don't care enough. And chief among those people shouting is, of course, Neil deGrasse Tyson. So Neil deGrasse Tyson is very angry when people talk about praying for the victims or praying for the families of the victims. He says, quote, evidence collected over many years, obtained from many locations, indicates that the power of prayer is insufficient to stop bullets from killing school children. Okay, evidence gathered from all over the world, from many locations across thousands of years, indicates that no religious person in history has ever claimed that prayer stops people from shooting other people. There's not a religious person in America who actually believes that if I pray, school shootings will end. Nobody thinks that. But the left is fully intent on using school shootings as a club to wield against their favorite political enemies. And Steven Pinker, whose book I'm going to talk about a little bit in Things I Hate. I talked about his Things I Like last week, and then I actually had a chance to read it, so now I'm going to talk about things I don't like about it. But Steven Pinker is a psychologist over at Harvard, and he was talking about atheism on MSNBC and suggesting that that we should quit it with all of the religion talk because obviously God doesn't exist.
All of which really cast doubt on the idea that there's a benevolent shepherd who looks out for human welfare. I mean, what was the benevolent shepherd doing in Florida while that teenager was massacring his classmates? So I don't write in order to win popularity contests, and I say many things, some of which readers will agree with, some of which they'll disagree with. I assume that readers have enough sophistication to evaluate different propositions. They may disagree with me on some things, and that's fine.
Okay, so this is the problem of theodicy. Okay, theodicy is the problem that has been literally considered thousands of times by thousands of different religious thinkers. Why would a good God allow bad things to happen? I do love it when people who are on the atheist left simply declare that the problem of theodicy is unsolvable and therefore God doesn't exist, as though their mind is God's mind. Bad things happen, therefore God doesn't exist. If you're using a school shooting to make the case against God, let me suggest that your priorities are misplaced. One of the things that can help here might be a society that takes virtue more seriously, that inculcates manhood more seriously, as opposed to a society of atomized individuals who apparently have no responsibility for one another. Maybe that's where we should start when we have these societal discussions. But again, it's all taking advantage. Bernie Sanders taking advantage of the gun control debate in order to push his agenda, even though Bernie Sanders' voting right on guns is actually a lot softer than a lot of other Democrats.
Of course, we have to make it harder for people to be able to purchase weapons. We have people now who are on terrorist watch lists who can purchase a weapon. Does this make any sense to anybody? Bottom line here, Republicans are going to have to say that it's more important to protect the children of this country than to antagonize the NRA. Are they prepared to do that? I surely hope they are.
Weird. I mean, because Bernie Sanders has said this, quote, folks who do not like guns are fine, but we have millions of people who are gun owners in this country. 99.9% of those people obey the law. I want to see a real serious debate and action on guns, but it's not going to take place if we simply have extreme positions on both sides. I think I can bring us to the middle. And yet there's no proposal there. There's just casting aspersions at people with whom he disagrees, which is quite gross. Again, all of this is silly. And you see John Kasich doing the same thing. John Kasich, one of the more gutless politicians of my lifetime, the governor of Ohio, who had a pretty pro-gun record when he was in Congress and had a pretty pro-gun record as governor of Ohio. Now, of course, he's coming out and saying we should ban AR-15s. Why should we ban AR-15s? Let's hear some of the worst logic we're going to hear today from the insufferable John Kasich.
I said, if all of a sudden you couldn't buy an AR-15, what would you lose? Would you feel as though your Second Amendment rights would be eroded because you couldn't buy a god-darn AR-15? These are the things that have to be looked at, and action has to happen before. And look, you're never going to fix all of this, but common sense gun laws make sense.
Okay, common sense. Well, I've never heard circular logic like that before. Common sense gun laws make sense. Well, thank you, definitionally idiotic human. Gun law. The question is, what is a common sense gun law? How about an evidence-backed gun proposal? How about that? Say an evidence-backed gun proposal makes sense, not common sense gun laws. Common sense is very often the last reserve of people who don't actually want to do the field work of having to look up the evidence. Common sense. When people say common sense isn't so common, that's because common sense would actually involve you looking at the evidence and then making a policy proposal based on it. By the way, the verbiage here is so stupid. The idea that, you know, here he is saying, if I can't buy an AR-15, do I feel like my Second Amendment gun rights have been violated? Well, if I didn't have to listen to John Kasich, would I feel like my First Amendment rights have been violated? Actually, yes. I don't like John Kasich. But if I couldn't listen to John Kasich, my First Amendment rights would be being violated. I have a right to hear what he has to say. What we like and what we don't is not the measure of a right. What we like and what we don't is a measure of preference. A question of right is what I have a right to do and what I have a right to have. I don't have to take advantage of that right in order for that right to exist. I have a right to sleep with as many people as I want to in the United States. I'm not going to do that. I don't like people who do that, but I have a right to do that. The point is this, right? If you're not telling your kids they can be anything in America, you're doing something wrong as a parent. And if you had to wait until Black Panther came out, right? We heard this about Barack Obama when he was elected too. Now that Obama's been president, Black Americans will feel like they too can be president. It's a transformative moment. And yet all we hear now is that America is deeply racist and Black people are still systemically discriminated against, and that Black people are still victims in American society. So it turned out it didn't mean anything. When Obama was president, we were told it meant everything. And then he was president for 2 terms, right? Reelected overwhelmingly. And then it turns out it didn't mean anything because we needed Chadwick Boseman to somehow make sure that Black people felt accepted in American society because a bunch of white executives at Marvel greenlit a film about Black people in a fictional country in Africa. And the insanity that has attended Black Panthers, it's crazy. I'll see the movie this weekend. I hope that it's good because I'm going to spend money on it. So anything I spend money on, I hope is good. But I will give you an honest review of that. I know that's been forbidden by the media. There's actually a law that you're not allowed to give your opinion on Black Panther. Emily Lakdawala, I think, summarizes the feelings of a bunch of insane leftist white social justice warriors. She tweeted this out yesterday, and it's totally crazy. She tweeted out, quote, "So I carefully did not buy Black Panther tickets for opening weekend because I did not want to be the white person sucking black joy out of the theater. What's the appropriate date for me to buy tickets? Is next weekend okay?" I think the appropriate thing for Emily Lakdawala to do is never to leave her home again or tweet. I think these would be, because honestly, you never know when you're going to offend someone just by your very presence. Like the necklace that she's wearing here, I think it's ugly. And it's ruining my white person joy today. Like, what kind of insanity is, what does she think of Black people? Like, how derogatorily do you have to think of Black people to think that if you're in a theater with a bunch of Black people, they're going to think, that white person sitting here in a theater, watching a movie, talking about how Black people are awesome. That's ruining my Black joy. First of all, what is Black joy, and why is Black joy different from white joy? Or different from almond joy, for that matter? I'm confused. What are we even talking about here? But the sensitivity police have gone so far that we now have to have fully segregated theaters to make sure that Black people are not offended by the presence of white people, according to Emily Lakdawala? And we actually have to segregate the theaters. It's amazing. I mean, we could do the converse. We did the converse for a couple hundred years in this country. Right? The converse was black people won't be allowed into white people theaters because that will offend the white people and ruin their white joy. This is stupid, folks. This is not only stupid, it's counterproductive to the notion of a good and honest and free American society. And then the New York Times has run a series of pieces this week, these long think pieces about Ryan Coogler's film. Okay, so there are two that I spotted right off the bat. One by Salamisha Tillett. I don't know who Salamisha Tillett is. I guess Salamisha Tillett is, well, I guess they didn't give this person's biography, so I don't know if this is a man or a woman. But the piece is called Black Panther Brings Hope, Hype, and Pride. And here's what it says. It says, I suppose neither of us is used to the spotlight. A dapper T'Challa, the Prince of Wakanda, says upon meeting Natasha Romanoff, a.k.a. the Black Widow in Captain America Civil War. A few scenes later, a recently orphaned and vengeful T'Challa, swapping his bespoke blue suit for a full-body bulletproof one, reappears as a new Marvel movie superhero. The Prince will have to live with the attention. Even before its February 16th release, Black Panther smashed box office records, beating out Captain America Civil War on first-day ticket advances, and surpassing Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, to become Fandango's top-selling superhero movie in history. Great. Okay. That's fine. I mean, sure. I mean, I hope the movie's good. But I do love this idea that, you know, this is some sort of amazing moment. Not since Spike Lee's Malcolm X has there been so much hype and hope for a movie among African-American audiences. From special group outings planned by excited fans to crowdfunding campaigns to ensure children can see it, Black Panther is shaping up to be a phenomenon. In December, a viral video of two African-American men excited to see the movie's poster with its all-star black cast. This is what white people get to feel like all the time, one man wrote on Twitter, seemed to capture the anticipation, garnering more than 2.5 million views. Now, a couple of things about this. One, Black Panther, the superhero, was created by two Jewish guys. And just FYI. Two, this is not what white people feel like all the time. White people don't go around thinking, oh, Captain America, my favorite white superhero. Oh, that's amazing. Iron Man, white superhero. And if you think like this, I would suggest that you might need to start thinking less tribally. Okay, if you spend your life going around thinking, oh my God, I'll bet white people feel just like this every time they see Tom Cruise in a movie. First of all, do black people feel like that when they go see Denzel Washington in a movie? I doubt it. Oh man, Denzel. Now I know what it's like for white people who see Tom Cruise. I've never once gone to a Tom Cruise movie and thought, oh, look at that white guy, he's representing. That has never occurred to me, not one time, because that's crazy talk, and you shouldn't think like that. And so it was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Those were the two Jewish guys. And now Ta-Nehisi Coates has written a new series of comic books. By the way, Ta-Nehisi Coates' comic books are garbage. I've read them. They're so bad, the Black Panther comic books. So I hope the movie is much better than the comic books. But here's Deirdre Hallman. Listen to this. Wakanda is a kind of black utopia. This is the country where this takes place. Wakanda is a kind of black utopia in our fight against colonialism and imperial control of black land and black people by white people, said Deirdre Hallman, a founder of the annual Black Comic Book Festival at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in Harlem. To the black imagination, that means everything. In a comic book, it is reality. And through a major motion picture, it's even more tangibly and artistically a reality we can explore for ourselves. There's so much power that's drawn from the notion there was a community, a nation that resisted colonization and infiltration and subjugation. So a few things about this. One, sorry to break it to folks, Wakanda is not a real place. It does not exist. It is just as real as Asgard. Okay, it's not a thing. Okay, number two, this idea that it's a fight against colonialism and imperial control. Here is the reason why so many people are going crazy over this. So one of the reasons people are going crazy over this is that supposedly the Wakanda, the country of Wakanda in the movie, and I haven't seen the movie yet, so this is speculation based on all of the news reports. The country of Wakanda has basically been separated from society for a long time. So it's sort of like 17th century imperial Japan, right? It's been separated from the rest of the world for a long time. White people have not come in. There's been no trade with the outside world except through vibranium, which I guess is some material, some alien material that landed there and is extraordinarily valuable and is used in weaponry like Captain America's shield. And they've been able to guard from the influences of outside culture. And therefore, according to the movie, Wakanda is the most technologically advanced country on planet Earth. It is incredibly advanced. It is filled with beautiful, wonderful people who all treat each other wonderfully. It is utopia. It is just the greatest place that ever was. And this is being portrayed as reality. The problem that I have with this is that there is no utopia for white people, for black people, for any people. It doesn't exist anywhere. There are two countries in Africa that technically have not been colonized. They're Ethiopia and Liberia. Okay, Ethiopia was conquered twice by the Italians, but was never colonized in the formal sense of colonies being placed there with Italian folks who then ruled the roost for a long period of time. Liberia was originally founded by the United States, which granted sovereignty to the local black population. And the idea was that a lot of black slaves in America who'd been shipped here against their will would be shipped back to Liberia. It was never really colonized in the technical sense. Both of those places have severe problems. Countries have severe problems. And countries that are isolated have severe problems too. Japan was isolated from Western civilization for centuries. That was not great for Japan. It wasn't great for China. This policy, North Korea is completely isolated from different countries. The idea that trade, isolation, racial unity, that these are the things you should be aiming for in a country is a really bizarre idea in a liberal order, in a new order where free movement of trade and population and money is considered a generally good thing and is better life all around the world. If you actually founded a country on the basis that it wouldn't trade with outsiders, that there wouldn't be any cultural exchanges, and that you would actually produce all you needed in-house, it wouldn't be utopia. It would be garbage. That'd be a bad country. And just because it's a country filled with black people, that wouldn't make the country any better. This was sort of the founding ideology of Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. This is the Yush ideology in North Korea. This is not a good ideology, and this is not a race-specific thing. I'm not saying Wakanda is bad because it's black or anything. That's stupid. I am saying that if your idea of a utopia is a place where there